I'm going to make a confession right at the start. I thought I knew what kept people sharp. I thought I knew what kept people going. I spent 30 years in a hospital system. I was surrounded by research, by physicians, by evidence-based protocol. I thought knowing was enough. It isn't. Knowing what keeps you healthy and actually doing it are two completely different disciplines, and the second one is the one that matters. I want to say something about that distinction before I get into the list, because I think it's the most important thing, and it's the thing most often skipped. I knew for most of my adult life what I should be doing. I knew about sleep. I knew about food. I knew about the research on social connection. I worked in healthcare. I was not operating from ignorance. I was operating from the belief that knowing was a form of doing, that understanding the mechanism was close enough to applying it, that the comprehension somehow counted. It doesn't count, not even slightly. The body does not respond to what you know. It responds to what you do, consistently, over time, without the drama of motivation. That is the lesson I learned at 71 when my heart gave me very direct feedback about 30 years of knowing without doing. My name is Pat Walsh. I'm 80 years old. I had a heart attack at 71. I'm here because I changed what I was doing, not dramatically, consistently. And I want to tell you the 8 things that made the actual difference. Not the things that sounded good, the things that, looking back from 80, I can trace to where I am right now. The first key: move every day. Not every other day, not most days, every day. I walk every morning, 25 to 30 minutes depending on the weather and my knees. I don't run. I don't track distance with an app. I put on shoes and I walk out the door and I walk. My cardiac rehab coordinator, Tom, said something to me 10 years ago that I wrote down. He said, "Ms. Walsh, the health benefit of walking is dose dependent. Small amount, every day, is worth more than large amount, occasionally." He was right. 10 years of daily 25-minute walks. My cardiologist uses the phrase remarkable for a woman of my age. That's what 25 minutes every morning, 10 years running, produces. I want to add something to this that Tom didn't say, but that I've noticed myself. The walk, over years, becomes more than exercise. It becomes the structure the day hangs on. When I return from the walk, I am a different version of myself than when I left, clearer, more settled. Whatever was looping in my head when I woke up has usually quieted. I cannot fully explain the mechanism. I know there is research on it, something about movement and cortisol and the nervous system, but the practical experience is simpler than the research. I am better for the walk, consistently, every single morning. In 9 years, it has never not been true. The second key: sleep, real sleep, 7 hours, not 6.5 most nights and 8 on weekends, 7 consistently. I was a terrible sleeper for most of my career. 5 hours, sometimes less. I thought that was endurance. My cardiologist told me sleep deprivation is a cardiovascular risk factor. I took that seriously. Now I'm in bed by 10, lights off by 10:15. I do not look at my phone in bed. I do not watch television in the bedroom. The bedroom is for sleeping. It took months to retrain my nervous system. Now I wake up at 6 without an alarm. That is either very good or very old, possibly both. I want to say something to people who are currently sleeping 5 hours and calling it fine. I was one of you. I said the same things. I don't need much sleep. I function well on less. I've always been like this. None of that was true. I functioned adequately on less. There is a difference between adequate and well that only becomes visible in retrospect. When I started sleeping 7 hours consistently, the quality of my thinking changed. Not dramatically, but there was a sharpness available at 9 in the morning that hadn't been there before. A clarity in the late afternoon that I hadn't experienced in decades. I thought that was age reversing itself. It wasn't. It was sleep. Just sleep. Doing what it's supposed to do when you let it. The third key, stay connected, deliberately. By which I mean maintain relationships with scheduled intention, not just when you feel like it. When I retired, I thought connection would happen naturally. It didn't. The structure that had produced connection, the office, the colleagues, the daily operational contact, was gone. Connection doesn't happen naturally after that. You have to build it differently. I call Michael every Sunday. Every Sunday. I go to 2 things at the senior center every week. Every week. I invite myself to Karen's twice a year, and I follow through. None of that is spontaneous. All of it is structured. And without that structure, I'd be substantially more isolated. The research on social connection and longevity is not ambiguous. Isolation is as dangerous as smoking. I say that from a healthcare context. Take it seriously. I want to add what the research doesn't capture. Connection is not just about quantity of contact. It's about the quality of being known. The Sunday calls with Michael are sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes an hour. What makes them matter is not the length, it's that he knows how my week went. He knows about the knee and the new book and the recipe box. He carries the context. When Elaine died, what I lost was not just a person I spent time with. I lost the person who had the longest version of my context. The one who knew the story from 1976. That is the specific loss that isolation produces over time. You lose people, and with each person, a version of yourself. Build connection deliberately. Protect it like the asset it is. It is the most irreplaceable thing you have. The fourth key, keep learning something. This one surprised me. I expected it to feel like work. I did not expect it to feel like relief. After I retired, I started reading history. Seriously, not casually. Then I joined a discussion group at the library. Then I took an online course about watercolor painting, which I had never done and have no particular talent for. The watercolor course was humbling. I was not good. I was methodical, as I am about everything, and methodical is not the same as talented in art. But the process of learning something I was bad at, being a beginner again, did something for my mind that nothing else quite replicated. I am convinced that being a beginner at something is one of the best things you can do for your brain. Not because of the specific skill, because of what it feels like to not know the answer. To be in the position of learning, not managing. For 30 years, I was the person who knew, who had the context, who gave the direction. I was very rarely the beginner. Being the beginner is different. You pay attention differently. You take things in rather than processing them. You are genuinely curious rather than strategically curious. My watercolor paintings are still not impressive. I keep making them, not because I'm getting significantly better, because the process of making them, the beginner's attention, the not knowing, does something for my head that I've come to value. Find something to be a beginner at, something you chose because you wanted it, not because it's practical. That combination, wanted, impractical, new, is surprisingly powerful. The fifth key, manage what you put in your body. I've talked about food in other conversations, specific foods, what I eat, how I eat. The summary is simple: real food, consistent vegetables, fish twice a week, almost no sugar. Cook most things yourself so you know what's in them. Not perfection, not a regime that requires suffering to follow. A baseline that you maintain without drama, 5 days out of 7. The habit compounds. What I'll add here that I don't say enough, the food is not separate from the rest of it. When I sleep well, I make better food choices. When I walk in the mornings, I'm less likely to eat carelessly at lunch. When I stay connected, I eat at the table instead of standing over the counter. The habits reinforce each other. This is the thing the wellness industry doesn't communicate well. They sell individual habits as though each one is a separate intervention. They're not. They're a system. Each one makes the others more likely. Skip one consistently and the others start to loosen. I don't think of food in isolation. I think of it as part of the whole. Which is why when I'm off, when the sleep has been poor or the week has been difficult, I check the whole system, not just the piece that's slipping. The sixth key, have a doctor you trust and actually listen to them. This sounds obvious. It should be obvious. I was not good at this for most of my working life. I managed physicians the way I managed everyone else. I scheduled efficiently, I was compliant with what was convenient, and I dismissed what I thought was overly conservative. My cardiologist, Dr. Reyes, changed that. Not by lecturing me, I would have tuned out a lecture, by asking me honest questions and listening to the answers. She asked, "What do you do to rest?" She asked, "How's your sleep?" She asked, "How often do you see people you actually care about?" A doctor who asks those questions is worth more than a dozen who only look at the numbers. Find one, and then do what they say. The doing what they say part is where most people, including me for years, fail. Not from ignorance, from the same arrogance I described at the beginning. The belief that knowing is enough, that your own assessment of your condition is as reliable as theirs. It isn't. You are too close to yourself. You have too much invested in a particular interpretation. Dr. Reyes told me things I didn't want to hear, about my sleep, about my stress levels, about the way I was managing or not managing my recovery. I listened, eventually, later than I should have, but I listened, and the outcomes are what they are. That is the sixth key. Find someone you trust. Give them your actual information, not the curated version, and then follow the guidance. The seventh key. Know the difference between solving problems and sitting with things. This is the one I'm least good at. I'm including it because it matters. I thought I was doing the right thing every time I solved instead of sat. Every problem converted into action. Every difficulty addressed before it could sit uncomfortably. What I didn't understand is that some things need to be felt before they can resolve. That converting grief into action doesn't resolve grief. That converting anger into productivity doesn't spend the anger. The body holds what the mind doesn't process. I know this at 80 in a way I did not know it at 50. I wish I'd known it at 50. Some things don't need your competence, they need your presence. When Elaine died, my first instinct was to do something, organize the memory, write the tribute, call the people who needed to know, be useful. All of that happened, but what I needed, what took me several weeks to allow, was simply to sit with the fact of her being gone, without converting it into a task, without managing it into a shape I could handle. Just letting it be what it was, an enormous loss. A 47-year friendship ended. The person who knew my mother's voice no longer here. When I finally let myself sit with that, instead of working around it, something released. Not the grief is still there, but the pressure of unprocessed feeling, that released. The body holds what the mind doesn't process. That is one of the truest things I know. I learned it late. I'm passing it along early. The eighth key. Know clearly what you're doing this for. Not in a grand philosophical sense, in a practical one. Why are you walking every morning? Why are you eating well? Why are you staying connected? If the answer is because I should, it won't hold. Because should runs out when willpower runs out. My answer is specific. I want to be at Karen's kitchen table for the next 5 years, having real conversations. I want to watch my grandchildren do things. I want Sunday calls with Michael long enough that we cover everything and also nothing. Those are concrete. Those are worth walking every morning for. Those are worth choosing salmon over something easier. Longevity for its own sake is not a good enough reason. Longevity for specific people, specific moments, specific conversations, that holds. I want to be clear about something. The reasons have to be yours, not what the article says your reasons should be, not what sounds virtuous, your actual reasons. The ones that feel true at 6 in the morning when the walk sounds unappealing. My grandmother lived to 94. She was sharp until the end. I used to think that was genetics. Now I think it was also that she always knew exactly what she was here for. She had a clear answer to the question. She had people who needed her to show up. She showed up. I'm working on being the kind of person my people need me to show up for. At 80. One morning walk at a time. 8 keys, no one of them miraculous. All of them requiring the same thing. Doing them when it's inconvenient. Doing them when you'd rather not. Doing them until they stop requiring decision and become simply what you do. That's all. That's the whole thing. After 30 years in healthcare and 80 years of having a body, that's everything I know. The cardiac event was the event. What came before it made it likely. What came after it is why I'm still here. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because the distance between where I was and where I am now is entirely the product of 8 unglamorous, daily compounding habits. Not a miracle, not genetics, not a program I paid for. Just this, every day, for 10 years. If any of this was useful, or if you've learned something about longevity I didn't mention, leave me a comment. I genuinely want to know. I read every one. And if you know someone trying to figure out how to take better care of themselves without being lectured at, share this with them. I'm not a lecturer. I'm someone who does the 8 things and can still read the fine print at 80. That's proof enough for me.